Why is there so little hope in Cameroon?
Many young people will graduate from school every day but lack the skill. You have to do something to make sure that you can help these young people.
They're confronting your parents as a young girl who has gotten pregnant at a very young age.
If you have already made the mistake, it's not the end of the world. Because if you do not have dreams, if you do not dream, then there's nothing to carry forward. I think that many people who think that they are ready for marriage and who even get into marriage, they're not ready for it. When I finally traveled to Switzerland, I told my friends, don't send money to me. In Italy, I had a good education. But this African continent has given us what we have.
You did the unthinkable that most African families do not like. You returned back to your country in Africa. You returned back to Cameroon.
I invested all my savings in my first business, paid rent, hired staff, and did all the things I saw abroad. But it just did not work because
And today we have another guest with us who is a major doer. We have Dr. Elmine Fotabe. Elmine is the chairperson of Funic Business School. She's the founder for the Association of the Promotion of Decent Work for Women and Girls. She's an overall leader and an inspiration for young Cameroonians, especially women and girls.
thank you very much for having me.
And definitely for you to have made it to that stage, for you to have made it to this stage, there's been a lot of factors that have helped you to mold you into who you are today. So what are some of these things that molded you into the ambitious go-getter?
Well, the first thing I think is my upbringing, my parents, that we had what we needed, let me and they supported me.
I followed a bit of what you do, and I know that at some point while being a student, while going to school, you had the difficult situation of confronting your parents as a young girl who has gotten pregnant at a very young age. How did that experience make you feel, and what are some lessons that you learned that young girls that are in that similar situation can be able to learn from?
Yeah, that was quite an experience. My dad was not happy at all, and for that to have happened out of ignorance left him very unhappy. But I learned a lot from that. But I also learned that you can rise from the ashes. My son was only a few months old when I returned to school. Many people do not know that I did not go to Form 5. I always saw it like a challenge. My friends had gone 1 year ahead of me. I wanted to catch up. But then again, if you have already made the mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can rise from the ashes and become whatever you want to become.
That's a powerful message, and I think you already touched on something I was going to ask, which was how does someone move from that? But I think you already touched on that. So because in many cases, you have people who get into these situations and then they think that is the end of the world, or they have maybe unsupportive families. But I think that message is very timely to ensure that people don't lose hope. At the end of the day, you have to carry forward. You have to take your dreams further. But
because if you do not have dreams, if you do not dream, then there's nothing to carry forward.
yeah.
So the best way to rise from situation, start dreaming today.
So you mentioned going through all these difficulties, having to skip a few classes to try and catch up. So how did you move from parents being difficult and not understanding some of the mistakes that were made? How did you move from there to the next part of your life, which was moving abroad and studying in Italy and Switzerland and struggling with the language and doing all these menial jobs to be able to survive?
When the opportunity presented itself for me to travel to Switzerland first, my parents did not hesitate. I remember my very first passport was made in Boya. We were living in Boya at that time. But I traveled to Boya with my dad for my first passport. Yeah. And when I finally traveled to Switzerland, I remember I needed money because I was thinking of going to school. And when my parents were struggling about it, and I would leave Switzerland and go somewhere else where I can work. That's how I found myself in Italy. I could walk. I told my parents, don't send money to me.
So that was a big way to rebuild trust and have them do that. And it's, kudos to your parents for being able to do that, which I think was really important. But while you were in Italy, obviously you don't speak Italian. You have a difficult time working all these jobs, working, washing dishes, doing all that. How was that experience like?
It was a learning experience. For me, every time I do something, I learn to love that thing. My first job I had to clean it. I learned to love that. That's why even in my home today, special care when I clean my home, because I learned that. It was a learning experience for me. I did not just see it as of making money, but I saw it as a means of becoming independent, of learning something else, something in another way. I cleaned houses, but I think that one of the best experiences I had was taking care of 3 children in a family. That gave how important it is to have both intentional about raising their kids. I learned a lot. Challenging experience, of course, having to clean houses, having to wash dresses, and all of that. But especially was a learning experience.
That's powerful for sure. I guess it's always good to look at it from an angle of, okay, you're learning, you're getting things done, not just from the angle that you're working menial jobs and you're
Oh
all of
no,
that.
no,
Yeah.
no! Never for once thought I was doing menial jobs. Don't I clean my home? So if I did that and then I was paid for. Don't I? Am I not a mother? I am. So if I was taking care of kids, then I was being trained to be. I never complained. That is why even today I don't complain.
And after this experience out there, going through school, doing all this stuff in Switzerland and Italy, you did the unthinkable that most African families do not like. You returned back to your country in Africa. You returned back to Cameroon. What motivated that decision?
Was a decision that was based on 2 factors. The first was economic. I saw the need for better education. In Italy, I had a good education. I saw the need to offer that same kind of education. So I thought I would come back to Cameroon and give us this. But then there was another dimension that I hardly talk about, which was the spiritual dimension. I got to form a personal relationship with God in Europe. I thought my son needed to form that kind of relationship. So I came back to Cameroon for that as well. But the economic aspect was always big on my mind. I saw the skills gap in Cameroon. Many young people who graduate from school every day but lack the skill. I kept telling myself, you have to do something to make sure that you can help these young people not just have certificates but have skills. Because that's what we lack. We cannot say that we're an illiterate nation. We are not. But what we lack is a translate that knowledge into employability is where we have a problem. That has been my driving force. I know that Africa needs me.
That's powerful, and I think that comes into something that maybe a lot of young people do not have, which is what you talked about. Africa needs you. That purpose, that you're doing something that's bigger than yourself. That purpose. How do you get that purpose? If you're a young person that is out there, you don't know what you want to do. You don't know what you need to be doing. You're just floating. How do you find that purpose?
How do you find that purpose? I'll go back to family life, early family life. Growing up, my mother was working in education. That time Kaskumba, and then we moved GSS at that time, GSS Nguts. And later she was transferred from educational affairs. I saw her many times. I'll go to her office and there'll be couples there. And she was, social affairs, they bring family issues there and she should advise, should listen. And then as a young person, my mother was almost always gone, always be traveling. And then that awakened in me desire for public service, serve your community. I always thought that I had a responsibility, just like my mother, to serve. Not all about just making money. I believe that life without service is quite empty. That I saw from my mother. But then I saw something else too from my grandfather. My grandfather was a reverend pastor and he had about 14 congregations that he was managing. And so at that time, we did not have the kind of road networks that we are trying to have in Cameroon now. So most times my grandfather would trek from one congregation to the other congregation, and sometimes he took us along. That kind of service to humanity, he knew that's something that he was passionate about. And many times he would say that church doesn't pay much, but he has the satisfaction that he's doing. That leaves a mark. And that's why when I sat in my master's classroom, in lecturer asked, what will you do after this degree? I thought of my mother, grandfather, then I thought of the skills gap that I identified. So having this example actually adds a lot to the purpose that we develop. And that's why it's very important for parents, exemplary life, because these young children watch, they see what we are passionate about, and it has a lot to do with how they are molded. So for me, I always thought that I wanted to give something back because my grandfather gave back. And so it came naturally for me that I have to go back there and try to fix it very naturally. This purpose cannot easily dictate. It comes from somewhere. It comes from a deeper place. Usually it comes from the experience that we live throughout our lives. But this is not to say that people who have not had those experiences cannot develop purpose. They can, just by watching this, by following us, whether we like it or not, this African continent has given us what we have.
So looking at that journey, you were out there, you came back, but you spent quite a few years. I'm sure even with the business you started, you've gone through a lot of ups and downs. So why have you stayed? Why have you not moved back like some people do? When things get difficult, you move back to where you think things are more rosy.
The secret is in knowing your why. Second thing is to expect that things will be tough. So it's not going to be realistic to think that it's going to expect that challenges will come. Now about my why. I knew my why before I left Cameroon. I knew that I was going abroad to acquire skills, knowledge, experience, money, right? And return to Cameroon. I knew that. It was very clear in my head. So it wasn't difficult for me to make the decision to come. When I got what I wanted, of course, that's why I went there. So I had to return. But of course, the second thing was, like I said earlier, I always look at the bright side of things. I built my mind to know that those challenges will come, but you only become successful when you overcome those challenges. I never run away from challenges. I face them. I look for.
Wow, that's great, because I know when you moved back, you definitely faced quite a few challenges. I heard you talk about one of your first businesses that faced quite some challenges, and also a lot on the human aspect, how you deal with people. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that first experience and what you learned from the challenge with your first challenge in the first business you started?
Yeah, actually that challenge extended to the second. That same challenge. So the first challenge I faced was financial. When I came with the enthusiasm, fresh from school, I invested all my savings in my first business. That was the first setback I had. Invested, paid rent, hired staff, and did all the things I saw abroad. But it just did not work because we're not ready to pay. So that after all of that, I had to fire the people. Some left. I wasn't making any money. I kept spending a lot of money. So at one point, I decided that I would return to Europe. Not because I wanted to run, because I thought that I needed to go work, raise more money, and come back to do it better. And this is the second part of the challenge now. So I went back to Europe and stayed there for a few months and worked, did some more menial jobs, and then raised some money. While there, I identified someone in Cameroon. I thought, bump my business together. And this is someone who had come to me for a service while I was in business in Boya. And so I thought, okay, let me reach out to this person. I liked the person's profile. The exchange we had was really interesting. And then this person had something I did not have. My background at the time was purely human resource management and business. I did not have a finance background. So when I did business here for the 1-2 years, I noticed that there was a huge need in the finance sector, the microfinance and the banking sectors. But I didn't have expertise in those. So I thought of this person who had a background in banking. This person would make a good partner. While in Europe, I contacted this person and I said, listen, let's work on this thing together. And the person was really excited about it. So when I returned off by myself, I drafted the partnership agreement, everything. Met this person and said, okay, let's do this thing 50-50. Well, that's how I was trained in Europe. Transparency, work, and making sure that, ventures succeed. So I brought that mentality home. And I said, let's do this thing 50-50. My work. And I said, listen, what we lacked initially was financing. We really had to go all out, advertise, go out and meet people. Bring in what you can bring. So the person brought in some finances. I didn't mind all the work. When I say all the work, I mean all the work, including developing even training materials for both of us. Sites, everything, because I thought, and then I made all the contacts. I went all out. I was always made all the contacts and did all of it. And then we thought, okay, it is time back to my initial passion. Because what we were doing was consultancy. We're training microfinance institute, better positioning, managing finances, managing human resources, customer service. That was not really why I returned. Why I returned was to feel that skill. I had a discussion, your passion. Let's do it. Let's now get a technique where we can train students that they need, not just the certificate. Started well. But before long, rough things went up between my partner and I. There are a lot of issues did not work out. We did not agree on hiring of lecturers, on administrative issues, like even what to write on the billboard. Basic issues. We did not agree. And then I realized that I made an error. Times we could not reach decisions because of this. So we were blocked most times. The polytechnic was not growing because we could not move forward. Sometimes a third party could not, because we didn't even embrace the third party, both of us. One person will bring in a third party, the other party will say, no, I don't want this person. So we dragged, and one day I got up and I said, listen, you know what? I can continue and I'll do something else. And that's how I abandoned all my years of work, put in all the energy. Then I started what today you all know as Fotabe University. But the lessons that I drew from that experience are still with me today. One of the lessons is legal practitioners in business. I didn't contact any legal practitioner. I thought that, okay, it was just, I knew this person. I trusted him. I could draft something and sign. But I learned that you cannot do business without being accompanied by that legal backing. That's the first lesson I learned. The second lesson I learned that partnerships, any form of partnership, whether it is business, whether it is marriage, especially marriage, whether it is friendship, any relationship should be based on shared values. When you do not have shared values, I didn't take time to understand the values of the other. And today, every one of my relationships, I am hiring a staff and I don't perceive that we share values, I don't hire you, no matter how qualified you are. Because I believe that you can hire someone who is underqualified, has the right attitudes and the right values, and you can train that person to become what you want. Yeah. But if someone doesn't have the values, the attitudes, no matter how qualified they are, I learned that's a big lesson I have learned in my friendships, in my relationships, whether they are work relationships, they are spiritual relationships, shared values are
shared values. And I think even in especially in personal relationships, shared values are especially important because those who you associate yourself with always end up rubbing off on you, and you're likely to go their way.
Yes, so right. I like the way you put it. They always end up rubbing on us some of their values. The truth is that I always believe that as human beings, we're like sponges. So when you have a sponge and you dip it into wine, it absorbs. When you dip it into oil, it absorbs. When you dip it into water, it does the same. So we associate with, they do not share our values somehow. But at the same time also, they can break us. If I didn't have the kind of mentality I have, challenges as an opportunity, I would have been broken. Imagine this, A young student, I was in Europe as a student, throughout. I returned to Cameroon 1 month after my graduation with the little money I had put aside as a student, not a full-time worker in Europe. And then I invested all of time. But because I had built this mindset of always expecting challenges, how to bounce back. And of course, also building the right networks.
Looking at the Cameroonian context specifically, and you talked about starting a polytechnic and being in education. Recently, at the University of Boya, there was a video that went viral at some point with students. Not sure all of them were students, but with people basically falling over each other to register for the French, one of the French aptitude tests, which is one of the documents to make up, your documents to travel to Canada and all of that. And for Boya being the small town that it is, and this number of people coming out just to be able to do that, it was really, really worrying. And people like yourself have been out there and then came back, but then you see this number of people still wanting to leave. Why is there so little hope in Cameroon?
If I want to go back to parenting, I would have made the same mistake. But there was someone who helped me not to. I remember when I left high school, I badly wanted to go to South Korea because some friends said South Korea line, as they call it. The South Korea line is easy now. People are going. And I always say that I'll remember him and I'll respect him forever. The former Minister of Higher Education, Biig Fotabe. I remember once I had a discussion with him and he asked me, "What do you know about South Korea?" And I don't know anything, but my friends are there. And then he said, "What do you know?" And that's when I thought that I don't even know what they are doing. Then he told me, "Do you know how far South Korea?" I asked, "Do you know how far South Korea is from Cameroon?" And I said, "I have no idea." He said, "It's very far. So you can stay there for the next 10 years. You'll not see your parents." He was talking to a young girl, And that struck a chord like, okay, wow, it's that far. Then he said, many of those friends who go there do not go to school. Or do you want to go there now and start working and not going to school? I said, no. Advice, change everything in mind. I would have done the same. So parenting, we need parents who can advise, understand what is happening, and they can advise. Now, the second thing I mentioned was communicate. Unfortunately, the media doesn't help. Because many people want to do these things because of what they imagine that they will find out there. But the media's role is also to educate. Thirdly, I have been in this sector for long, and besides I am a corporate trainer. I have been a leadership coach, and I coach senior management in many. There is a need for employable young Cameroonians. And so many young Cameroonians do not have this information. And then the fourth thing I mentioned was social media. Well, we all are on social media. And we know that there can be a lot of misleading information on social media. A lot of misleading. Not saying things the way they are. All these things, people selling dreams, continent. But I need to say that I traveled out of this country because I thought that the education I'll have out there better for me. And all of that you find there. But only if you're traveling for those purposes. But if you have the opportunity of going for studies, have the opportunity of going for work, but remember that this country needs you. I went there, I had the education, I had the experience. Back here, and I need more people to come back and join me.
And I think one other thing that you touched on is the governance aspect. I think there's a big governance angle that is not being looked at, because when for example, I'm in Yaoundé a lot of the time, and one of the biggest carrefours, junctions in Yaoundé or at Adomisport, you have a big billboard, one of the biggest billboards, and it's Prepare Canada. It's the marketing for, do you want to travel to Canada? And even on the national television, you have people advertising move to Canada on national television, which is sponsored by taxpayers. There's a bit of a governance angle to that, which I think is lacking.
You're right, absolutely. The truth is that when leadership shows you that it is possible, then you would stay. But if our governments, our leaders are intentional about showing that hope, communicating and telling us that it's supporting initiatives like scholarship opportunities that we run. I think that we are going to be able to hope. But see, I whenever I talk about governance, I'm a bit reticent because all are involved in this. The leaders are trained by leaders are our friends. The leaders are our family. But you know that I think that recently our government started doing that with nurses and teachers, restricting the number of nurses and teachers who have to travel. Those are the things we are talking about. But more has to be done. While restricting them, what are the options that are here for them? How do we support them to make the best of these options? What kind of conversations do we have? The things that are important, that we still have quite some work to do in.
That's very important, especially for women. But coming back to you as a woman specifically, there's you're unmarried, you're not a missus yet. Is that an intentional decision taken by you, or is it something that you're in the process of changing? Or
Very recently, I had made the choice of forming what people commonly say wife material. Because for many years, I focused on the things that I do for my community. Because I also think that marriage is something you get in psychologically. I believe that you can only give what you have and only attract that you are. I want to have a good husband. I should build myself right now.
that's great. So at least you're not in the camp of the radical feminists who believe 100% that men are the enemy, and a woman should never get married and have a man in life. So you're not in that camp for sure.
Um, Feminism in itself is not a bad thing. I think that many people who think that they are ready for marriage and who even get into marriage, they're not ready for it. A woman thinks that she needs a man at all costs. That's where I draw the line.
It really boils down, for me, it really boils down to the two people at the end of the day, because two people who decide to come together, work together, build a life together, it's something special, something beautiful for real. And the power tussle and all of that, roles and responsibilities, and yeah, I know that obviously there may be some women that want to do more, or providing for a family and things like that, but there may also be some men who want to maybe take care of kids and do that type of work. So I think it's more of a give and take, and working together with someone to see what works best for the two of you.
When I talk to my mentees, I tell them that I'm a woman and I'm happy to be. I want a man who can lead me. Just need to understand. And why would a man want to take the back seat and let the woman lead?
So I'm sure very soon we would be, hearing big news from Dr. Fotabe, and I think just for people who I'm sure would have a difficult time finding as well, if you eventually end up doing that, just what would be the qualities that you'd be looking for in someone like that, someone like you being very accomplished? What qualities would you be looking for in a man that you would eventually settle down with?
Okay, someone like me being very accomplished, no. I think that accomplishment, when we talk about marriage and relationships, are how ready. And so that's the first thing I want to look at. Accomplishment in terms. Now, again, I'll go back to that guidebook, because that's my guidebook. And we are not left to what that guidebook has told us, qualities that we need. The first thing is values that I hold dear. Because I hold such values, I'm going to values in a man that would eventually become husband. So the first thing, of course, is love. I like it very much when the Bible says that love is a perfect bond of union. That's the first thing. So the man should have love in his heart. There's no way I want to be with someone who doesn't have love. But love for what? Love first for God. That's the first thing. The man should have love for God. Then the second thing, I work extremely hard. The third thing that I hold very valuable is honesty in all. This is where a lot of people have things wrong.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fotabe. I think it's been such a great conversation, such a great discussion, talking about all these different elements and all the advice that you've been able to give to young people, to women, to people that are pushing on so many different things, business, life. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being with us till the end. Please follow and engage with Dr. Fotabe or across our platforms with links in the description. And I'll do my best to bring you even more influential, thoughtful, and accomplished guests. Thank you, and bye bye.